All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. And it's Monday. And I had a great weekend. Do you want to know why I had a great weekend, Ann?
Ooh, Laurie, tell me why.
It was my birthday.
Yay! Happy birthday!
Thank you. And that's Rebecca, who we're going to introduce you guys to in a second. I feel like I have like this little the cheerleader. It's great. But it's, it's kind of weird because I feel like as you get older, birthdays aren't quite as fun. And so with our kids, like a lot of it centered around our kids. Like my daughter was the first time that she made me breakfast, and it was just so sweet because she kind of came up with her little orange juice and this little crepe thing that she had made, and it was just great. It was a great weekend. How was your weekend, Ann?
Mine was great. It was a little cold here, but yeah, it's nice. I was actually invited at the last minute to the Van Gogh immersive exhibit. So it's when Van Gogh is has this light show all 365 degree around on the walls with amazing music, and it's awesome. It's very relaxing. You have the painted circles on the floor.
Yeah.
If you have a circle, you sit in the circle and you just enjoy the show.
Huh.
Awesome.
Was this in downtown Toronto at an art institute there?
Yeah, it's like a moving traveling exhibit. So
Okay.
It's in Montreal, now it's in Toronto. And
Nice.
it's amazing. So if you ever have the chance, go. It's worth it.
Yeah. Oh man, that reminds me. I'm just missing cultural events right now. I'm missing cultural things. I don't. The closest we get to culture now is watching American Ninja Warrior or something. I don't know. But so Ann, we have an amazing guest on the podcast today, and Rebecca, I'm going to introduce you in a second. But let me just say, I'm really excited to have you on. I'm actually part of a local anti-trafficking ministry here in Chicago area. So the topic here is really kind of dear to my heart too. So I want to welcome you, Rebecca Bender. And Rebecca, you just wrote this incredible book that I devoured last week. And it's called In Pursuit of Love, One Woman's Journey from Trafficked to Triumphant. And so we are going to talk about your story, and the book is published by Zondervan. So I encourage all of you guys to go out and get the book and read it. And it's a really easy read, couple hours, super inspirational. I love your writing style. Yeah. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm getting to join Coffee with Friends.
Isn't that fun? Yeah. It's like, and we should have like these little mugs with our little logo or something on them.
There you go.
So Rebecca, tell us a little bit about yourself, and just a little bit about your story to start with.
Yeah, my story in terms of, what I obviously went through in the book is I was born and raised in a small town in Oregon, and I was, for all intents and purposes, kind of a normal small town, blue collar, all American kid. My dad worked at the local lumber mill, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She taught aerobics on the side. I'm an 80s kid, so I have pictures in leotards with a headband when I was younger. So just like a normal kid. And then, even kids from good homes have vulnerabilities. And my parents divorced when I was 9. It was a real ugly divorce, and created a lot of seasons in my adolescence feeling unwanted and unimportant and unseen. And those took root, even though you don't realize that as a kid, right? You're not like later on in your 20s going, I think due to some vulnerabilities I experienced in my childhood. You don't think like that. And so you just are trying to fill life with lots of distractions or things that make you feel seen and wanted and valued, even though they're the wrong things. And that's kind of how it all began for me.
Okay, so in your book, you talk about, it's one of the very first sentences where you're talking about growing up, wanting to be a kindergarten teacher, I think it was, an artist. And then, Rebecca, you were trafficked. And tell us kind of what happened. What happened there? What was the kind of the series of events that led to that? I have a young daughter right now. And so I like this is it's more high on my radar as well. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, I grew up, like you said, having all these other dreams of what you want to be when you grow up, as most little girls. The other day I asked my daughter what she wanted to be, and she said that she wants to work at Petco. And then another daughter said, I want to be a preacher. And, you know, it changes, as we all know, with kids. And I had big dreams. Actually, one of my big ones was I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. I like to make jokes. I like to be fun. I've always been kind of a funny, gregarious kid. I actually was Harvest Ball Queen, which doesn't give you a crown. It gives you a rubber chicken, because that's the only dance where they vote for the funniest kid in class. So I was always kind of just fun and engaged and wanting to hang out and be kind of, you know, make the joke, be the class clown kind of kid. When I graduated high school a year early, I was a varsity athlete, honor roll student. I was goalie for our local 6A high school, in a big high school. And I was accepted into Oregon State University. I'd been assigned my dorm room, and I was really excited to get out of my small town and see the world. This was going to be, you know, my big thing. And then I got pregnant, and I decided to give up my dorm room and enroll in community college instead, unenroll from university. My daughter is an incredible young woman, and I'm so glad I made that decision, because she's just brilliant. And she's also what kept me, you know, fighting for my life when things changed. She's the thing that really pushed me to try to get out and fight for her and do more. But it was during that time as a young single mom trying to put myself through community college that I met a young man who had all the answers. My vulnerabilities had started to resurface. I'd started to feel more unimportant, unwanted. I'm the girl on campus with the kid, feeling really isolated, still off in this college town without any family or support. So I didn't want to leave. I just decided I'd get an apartment with a friend and go to community college instead of living in the dorm and going to the university. But it just didn't totally play out that way, and a lot of vulnerabilities and wanting to be a part and feel valued, and just trying to fill that God-shaped hole in my heart with anything. And that's when this young man, who's about 24, I was now 18, probably close to 19, and he was fun and funny, and he had big dreams too, and he had all these ideas, and he talked about us as a family, and he dated me for 6 months, got to know my hopes and my dreams. And really, he was a con artist. He was a trafficker that was getting to know all of my vulnerabilities so that he could exploit them. And he truly was a chameleon, pretended he wasn't the same age he said he was. He didn't have the job he said he had. He actually ended up having this criminal record of stalking and providing substances to minors that I had no clue about. So he targeted me. He targeted the girl with the kid. That's what traffickers do. They look for vulnerable people in communities, and then they identify what that need is, and they offer to meet it. And later on, you realize, after being secluded from family and friends, that meeting that need comes at a great price that you were not aware of. And that's where fraud comes into play. I mean, the definition of human trafficking in America is the use of force, fraud, or coercion, a point of recruitment, a point of destination, in order to profit off of commercial exploitation. So someone has to monetarily profit. And I've done a lot in Cook County. I've done a lot with your Cook County Task Force, actually, and I've done some trainings there. So, and I've trained Canadian Mounted Royal Police also over in Nova Scotia, was where we did our CRMP training. And so now I'm really blessed. Obviously, there's more twists and turns you're going to get into, and I know you have more questions. I'm so glad you read the book, because then I know we get to dive into, but I'm grateful today to get to use my lived experience to go back and help other communities know how to recognize and how to respond to this issue.
If I could ask, like, I mean, obviously, if you are a fraudster, you're a professional. Like, you are good. Like, you, and if it's a career that you've honed. So I don't blame you as an 18-year-old young woman with a kid, because everybody wants to belong. Like, you know, I think that's a human nature thing that we all have. And then if like a professional con artist comes along, I don't blame you. But like, do you have like just a couple of tips for us for like, how do we recognize that? Because I think that it doesn't matter how old you are, 18, 28, 38, 48, you could still be.
Yeah. I think you're so right. And I think I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes you have people saying, well, I would have done this, or why didn't you do that? And you think, well, you're very young, right? Who didn't make a bad decision under the age of 20, 25, really, if not still today, sometimes we don't make the best decisions. And so to be young and vulnerable and impressionable and, not really know, born and raised in a small farm town. Like I grew up skipping rocks on the river and feeding my lamb or a baby cow before school. Like I didn't, you don't have a lot of experience with identifying those type of people. And then even in when we went off to the college town, Eugene, Oregon. I mean, most people don't think of human trafficking and think probably happening in Eugene, Oregon. They're thinking big city or overseas or somewhere else, but not here. And my family was no different. My family wasn't thinking maybe she's being trafficked. My family thought maybe she's on drugs, something's wrong, maybe she's in domestic violence, maybe she's in prostitution. As the years went on, they started, they knew something was wrong, but no one thought human trafficking. That only happens to kidnapped kids overseas, not 19-year-old quote unquote adults here in small town America. And so yeah, in hindsight, there was lots of red flags. I mean, as a healthy adult, I can see lots of red flags that I couldn't see as a young person. So thanks for saying that. We actually have a list of red flags on our website. There's lots. A couple big ones are going to be any increased in hypersexual behavior that you see in your kids. And oftentimes I would say 3 or more of these should be a concern, not one on their own. Oftentimes all of these can be one on their own, but usually if there's 3 or more, we would recommend you looking into things. Suddenly having things of monetary value that your kids can't afford, expensive cars, expensive clothes, purses, jewelry, even just cash. I mean, I'd bring up right here, it's the Epstein case that we've all watched for a long time. Those young girls went home to their parents every single night for dinner, went to school. And the reason it was found is because a mom noticed her daughter had cash in a drawer. And she thought, how does my 15-year-old have so much cash? That's how the investigation on trafficking began. And I think that's important because if we're only picturing stranger danger, we're going to miss these really crucial, small, gradual expansion of boundaries, which is more common in predatory behavior than a snatch and grab. Because to traffickers, this is a business and I have to keep their products sellable, right? And so what's the path of least resistance, and what's going to make more money? And that's how traffickers are thinking.
Wow. So Rebecca, I am interested. So during those years that you were trafficked and you had a daughter, now how old was she like 1 to 6? Kind of
yeah, age? She was about 7 when we ran finally.
Okay. So tell me like what was going on in your mind like during that time? Did you have any, as you thought about the future, was there still glimmers of hope for you as you thought about the future? I mean, I know that you were motivated by your daughter, right? And so, but like, where were you pulling inspiration for hope, or was it really hard that time to even think about the future? Kind of what was going on in your head during that time? Give us like an inside look on what that was like, what that feels like.
I think when you've been living in a state of trauma, I mean, by the time I got to Vegas, he took me to Vegas and then forced me into human trafficking. He worded it in a way that it was just going to be to get this moving money back. And so you're kind of like, you're scared and you're afraid, but you don't want to go back to being the single mom in putting themselves through college, and you're in love and you think it's a lot of similarities why women don't run from domestic violence experiences immediately. Sometimes it's like, well, maybe it won't happen again. And you want to believe that maybe it will just be this one time. And then things will go back to happy and hopeful and excited. And so I think I thought that in the beginning, like, oh, it'll just be to get the moving money back. And then he'll stop, or I won't have to do it again. But it was always something. It was always this dangling carrot that I had to reach, or another issue that came up that made him continue to force me into prostitution nightly. And over time, I started using drugs to mask my shame and embarrassment and to cover just my emotions. And within 18 months, I felt like I was so completely hopeless. I was a full-blown addict by 21. My mom had taken my daughter. I tried to commit suicide after my daughter was gone. Just wanted to be done. I couldn't figure out how to get out. I explained it to people. It's like the trauma and abuse, both from him and the people you're being sold to, and you're 20, 21, like you don't totally know how to navigate this whole new world. And it's like you just live in this tornado. And if anyone's ever been sleep deprived or food deprived, your brain actually doesn't totally think clearly. It's like this fog you live in. That's why people with newborns pour orange juice in their coffee instead of creamer, right? Like your brain literally doesn't think right when you haven't had a lot of sleep, let alone you don't have a developed brain, let alone you have the trauma and psychology of abuse. And so it's all of this mixed up, and you feel like I just need a moment to catch my breath, to think of like a plan, but no moment comes. And it's just like this tornado that you want to just say, like, just give me a minute. I need to think how to get out of this. And you don't, and it doesn't come, and it starts to feel hopeless. Like you start to spiral out, like, I don't know how to do this anymore. And that's when they start to find ways to escape. I think that's when you do see people start trying to run, start trying to call for help. My mom would call 911 and they'd say, without an address, ma'am, there's nothing we can do. She's an adult. And my mom would say, well, that's part of the problem, is they'll only give me a P.O. box. Like, I don't know where my daughter and my granddaughter are. And she's only 19. She's not that old. They would say, I'm sorry, we can't help you. So my mom and dad would start planning, like, do we drive to Vegas? Do we drive around looking for, like, what do you do when someone's over 18, but still very, very vulnerable?
So tell us, how did you get out? What's the great exit? Tell us about the great exit after 6 years. Yeah.
Without the hardship, it's hard to celebrate the win, right? And so it is hard sometimes to hear the reality of sex for sale in America. It's just rampant. And there's three people in that equation. I think it's important for anyone that's listening that has children to know. There's buyers, there's sellers, and there's victims. And we all want to protect our daughters. We sometimes forget that buyers are our number one buyer of sex in the world is American men. And so how are we raising our sons in a really hypersexual culture, in a very pornified culture? I think that's an equally important question we need to remember on this spectrum of the equation of trafficking. So, but to answer your question, that was kind of a side note. That was free. But what we did, for me, what was really the caveat and the catalyst was my mom, when she took my daughter, I had two big escapes. One was when my mom took my daughter, she gave me a list of rehabs. There was one rehab on there that was a Christian rehab. And I said, I'm not going to no Christian rehab. These Christians don't got a clue what life is like on the streets. That's what I thought. And nowhere had vacancy except the Christian rehab. And I pulled up. Yeah, it always happens. I remember getting there, and this older Latino man came out. He had like pockmarks on his face. He had norteño on his neck. And he goes, are you Sister Rebecca from Las Vegas? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm Pastor Joseph, the home director. It's nice to have you. And I was like, Pastor? Okay. Wow. I thought, homeboy's all right. I'll stay here. I felt safer staying with him than I did. The only experience I'd had with church was my grandma. And it's no offense to grandmas, or grandma's churches are great. But when you're a young person, I couldn't imagine sharing these horrible things with these really sweet ladies who I felt like would be so shocked and so appalled. And so that's what I pictured. And I know that's not probably how they would have responded, but as a young person, that's just what I knew. So when I was able to find a group of people that felt more like my people, I was willing to hear and listen and open up and be very transparent. And it was at that home that I was radically delivered from drug addiction at the altar and saved. And it was just shocking. I didn't even think that happened. Just went to the altar. I remember a lady prayed for me, and I just started crying so uncontrollably. And I got up and I was just drenched, must have been sweat. And from that moment on, it just like something broke, and I never felt like using drugs again. Not once, not a cigarette, not a drug, nothing. now I have a glass of wine every now and then, but it's very, very different. And that took me a lot of time even to have a glass of wine. I was very afraid that I would backslide if I had one drink, and I'd have all these girlfriends that felt normal off at bridal showers or doing things. And I thought, I'm not like normal girls. I can't. And it just gripped me in fear for so long until I started getting to know people that weren't trafficked. And I thought, wow, we all have crap that we're working through. We all have something that we've been through, that we've worked through, that, you know, catches us up. And when I saw that in my friends that I had made, as I tried to find a sense of normalcy, it really helped me to find freedom, because I saw that we're actually a lot more alike than we are different. And so I had a glass of wine at a bridal shower, and I was like, this is gonna be it. I was so afraid, but so much freedom came from realizing that that is completely no longer who I am, and it was still holding on to me. And it's like having one glass of wine actually broke off. Actually, I'm not that, you don't get any more foothold on my life.
Awesome.
And I say that because I think sometimes it can be this, like, which way do you go with sobriety, especially as a former addict. And I'm not like, my push, I hope people hear my heart, is that we all have our own journey to walk through, and we can't use our measuring stick for everyone else's measuring stick. It's just different. We all have a different journey. So it was really freeing for me.
So good.
The theme I heard a couple times maybe was basically the lies that we believe about ourselves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that you weren't worthwhile and that you weren't valuable. And in those lies, it just isolates you more and more from society. And then also when you were free, like that you still were different, right? But and realize the truth that we all have our own struggles, and that we are human. I really am so glad that you're able to, like, you know, be free of that. And thank goodness for this pastor guy.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, you said you could hang with him, like, so you felt safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for you? Like, how important was it for you to feel safe, and that you would have a safe person?
No, I don't know if back in the day I could put the language to feeling safe in terms of physical safety. I think when you're wrapped up in fear, it's not, at least in my experience, when you're wrapped up in fear, it's not about finding a solution. It's about literally living in that fear so much that you actually don't know what you need sometimes, right? It's like, I just don't want this. I don't want, you know, it's like you find all the negative things. Well, I'm afraid of this. Well, what if they judge me? Well, what if they think differently? What if they won't understand? What if they're going to think I'm this horrible prostitute girl that's just this junkie? So you just have all these fears that control your thoughts, instead of, what do I need to get out of this? What do I need to be solutional in my thinking? What tools do I need to put in my tool chest to move from fear into freedom? And I don't know that without having someone come along and show me some of those things, that my mind would have even shifted out, because I had dug such a neurological trench and neural pathway in my thought patterns to live in. Are they going to be after me? Are they going to come find me? Is my criminal record going to come up? Are they going to use my social to rack up debt? Did I just take this huge hit on my credit report and I'll never be able, do I need to file bankruptcy? Are they using, it's just this constant bombarding of fear that it's like an ant hill, right? Where you're like, or those ant farms you see, you open up and there's all those little tunnels. It's like somehow we've allowed fear to consume the thought patterns, and it takes a lot of work to let people in and teach you that there's other ways, and find solutions and create new pathways in your thinking. And it's a lot of work. That's why, when people talk about rescuing survivors, that term rescue is actually pretty frowned upon in the anti-trafficking world, because we need help. We need a seat at the table. We need people to give us tools and options and resources and education. But it's a lot of the survivor themselves doing the really hard work ourselves to grab our thoughts, to make the choice, to get up daily and choose to think differently. And sometimes that rescue feels like the credit is only put on the helper, and we forget the powerful resiliency and strength of the survivor, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a passive thing, it's actually an empowering thing.
Yes.
You that there are different, you do have options. There is a different way to live. There are different choices that you can make, then you have ability to make, even though it might be really, really, really hard. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anytime someone, you know, the majority of people who are trafficked come from very marginalized homes. National average, around average, it changes every year. National average, 75% of trafficked kids come out of foster care. 75%. Wow. So we're talking about lots of options. Like, yes, you do have a lot of options. And some people don't. Like that, the reality is some people don't. Some people don't have a great mom they can call. And I can come home to my family and they're going to watch my baby so I can go to college, and they're going to surround me with support. And some people do not have that. And so what are their options? And so I think that's what, you know, advocacy is really about, is helping create these individual empowerment plans, really, right, to help people navigate their specific options, and then what gaps are there, and how we as a community, as a church, as advocates, as social justice warriors, how we can play a role in helping meet needs and gaps in people's lives who might not actually have some options. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Can I ask about your parents? Because they, you know, they took your daughter from you, which is bold, but obviously the right thing to do, but really, really, really brutal. I'm sure it was like heart-wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
But then they were looking for you, you know, even though the police said it was impossible. But then what happened after? Like, were they still there for you? And are they still there for you?
Yeah, no, my family, I'm so grateful. I have the great aunts, my aunt and my aunt and uncle and my grandma and my mom all kind of shared my daughter when I went to rehab. When I finally went into that home, it was about an 18-month commitment, a little bit under that I went into a women's shelter. And I'm so grateful that my family took her and came alongside her and put her in private school. And my uncle is a teacher at a Christian school, and so they got free tuition because he's a teacher there. And so my mom took her on the weekends. My aunt and uncle had her on the weekdays, and they would drive her all the way up to visit me once a month. It's about a 5-hour drive one way. Wow. I'd get a visit from my daughter, and I'd spend Christmas in a hotel with her and my mom and presents. And my mom would do crafts where we would cut out and make an actual tree and like pin it on the wall of the hotel room, and just really trying to remind me of the goodness that was to come, to just stick it in and push it out and get through. Those are really hard seasons.
Wow.
And so that's why it's like, you know, wanting to remind people to celebrate the strength and resilience. There's hundreds and hundreds of victims now turned survivors all across the country and beyond who are strong today and resilient and sit on task forces and work as crisis response advocates or sane nurses. And they got there because it took a lot to get there, that they dug their heels in and pushed through and pulled out. And that's why I'm so honored to be a part of kind of the survivor leader community, because there's so many like us out there.
So Rebecca, like, you are so brave. Like, let me just say that. Like, I just look at you and there's so much courage. And I am just blown over by like you and you sharing your story. And if you guys watch the video, like, Rebecca, I'm watching your face as you're talking. And like, there's moments of tears, like, that seem to kind of bubble, but then there's moments of joy where you just smile really big. And it's just like this all encompassing, like, all of it, like, is there. And so I think for people who have been through trauma, sometimes people tend to go one of two ways, right? Either one, they just shut down and they're like, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to move on, just move forward. And then some people are like, no, my story is part of me. And then it's kind of like your gift to the world, right? Or like, so how did you make the decision to like share your own story? Because I mean, I know like some things in my life, it took me years to start sharing my story of certain things that happened. because it's a very personal one, right? Where it's like, you know, sometimes you have to feel like you're at a point where you're ready to do that. You have to feel safe, like you're, but the empathy that you can have towards those who are suffering, those who have suffered trauma is just like, I mean, immeasurable. So how did you know, like, it was time to tell your story, and that you would then be that resource for other people?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I think I'm the kind of that go get 'em kind of personality. That's why I graduated high school in 3 years instead of 4. I'd always been kind of this ambitious, move forward, come on, we can do it, let's go type of person. And even though I am and can be empathetic, I'm also the type of tough love kind of leader. When I'm like, come on, girl, this is bad. I'm like, let's remember how bad it really was. Can I be real with you? Can we share about how bad this really was? Like, this is hard, but at least there's a benefit at the end. Whereas, like, let's remember how hard things really used to be, and there was no benefit, And so I'm really grateful that I can and have the ability to just share very vulnerably and raw with people that need to hear it. But I think something the human trafficking movement does as a whole is we can implicitly put a lot of pressure on survivors to tell their story. And oftentimes when survivors are actively receiving services from organizations, they can be encouraged to share too soon. And it's out of good intention, right? Like, our program's working, we want to share it with people. But I would encourage people to go find someone who has already graduated from your program and has a substantial amount of time out and has determined that they want the public to know their story. Because when we put people that are actively receiving services, that power dynamic, of course they're going to say yes. They feel obligated. You're feeding and clothing them. There's we can't forget power dynamics are real. And so the movement as a whole makes you feel like you're only good for your story. And it's been a real interesting journey as a leader in the trafficking space to remind survivors and to teach nonprofits that survivors are more than their story, that they're more than one bad thing that happened to them years ago, that they don't have to be public with their trauma, that they have a lot of other things they can bring to the table, and that survivors might not want to be in this movement, and that's okay. There are millions of people in the world who've experienced lots of different traumatic moments that have moved forward with their life and have not decided that they want to go be a part of, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers or a child abuse hotline. Like, there's lots of people who move on to doing what God is calling them to do. And I think that's the brilliance of true freedom, is to be able to figure out what gifts and talents do I have, and what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? And will it include sharing your story? That may be, or maybe not. Like, it doesn't define your worth, whether you want to share your trauma or not. And yeah, I definitely didn't know that. And I came forward with my story, I think, way before I was ready. And I shared things from the stage that I'm embarrassed of today, that I would never say today, that I had got trauma therapy from. And I thought, wow, I wish I wouldn't have shared it like that now that I've had some years of therapy under my belt. And I get to share that with people now. I mean, still being vulnerable to say, hey, here's what I shared too soon, or here's how it affected my family on Christmas Day when my mom wanted to know why I would share that about our family. Or, omitting isn't lying, omitting is preserving. And it's okay to not have to share every single detail with the world, especially a world that's so visual, because people then begin picturing whatever it is you're sharing. And so I think it's just important to be really thoughtful around really what you want to put out for the rest of your life. And that's how you empower survivors, is you give them classes on that.
That's so good. Okay, so let's jump to what you're doing now. Talk to us. You have the Rebecca Bender Initiative. Talk to us about that, and then talk to us about this Elevate Academy that you started. Those two things.
So a couple of years ago, I decided, well, when I first got out, I thought I want to share my story, but I didn't really know what I was going to do or how. I just started sharing my testimony anywhere that would listen. And I realized that I wanted there to be a call to action and some solutions to it, not just someone that could, tell a sob story. I felt like, I could throw a rock and hit a sob story. Where's the call to action? Where's the solution? How are we going to fix it? And so I created a law enforcement training from my testimony, mainly because I'd been to jail a lot, and we had this federal case that was the pivotal moment to let me escape. And so I thought, man, I wonder if I took all of my experiences with both county arrests and federal cases and put it in a law enforcement training, how we laundered $4 million, how we, all the things, what they want to know, what cops want to know. And God just blew favor. And in 7 years, we've trained well over 100,000 first responders, law enforcement, FBI, vice schools, CIA, money laundering task forces, all sorts of prosecutors, detectives. I work cases now, so I actually get to take the stand and testify at trials as a human trafficking expert, just like a blood splatter expert or a forensic expert in some capacity. So I'm really blessed and thankful to be able to work with so many groups that can make change. And from that, doing lots of consulting and stuff with other policy reforms, and it just took some time for me to find my lane. And I kind of detail that a little bit in the book. I tried at the very end to show people how I tried kind of 9 different ways to fight trafficking, and some I was not good at, but it didn't mean that I wasn't called to fight trafficking. It just meant I had to find what I was really good at. I call it Marie Kondoing, like crisis response, no thank you, and trying policy. And so I hope, and through, on our website, we offer a find your lane kind of quiz and free e-course for people that want to find their own lanes out of the 9. And so from there, though, we started having survivors reach out and asking to be mentored. And at the time I was finishing my degree online, because I live in a small town where there's no universities. And I had this epiphany where I felt like if I could get a master's online, I could mentor online. And so long before COVID, we started Elevate Academy. It was the first online school for survivors of human trafficking to figure out what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. And we started 6 years ago. We had 5 women in our first class. And this month we celebrate 777 women in 10 countries and 368 US cities that have been through our career development, professional development. It's just so cool. It's so cool to be able to see women find freedom and find their place in their community and sit on their task force and get a job in their nonprofit and be a part of changing laws. We just put out a recommendation with the National Advisory Council to Congress on 127 recommendations that the US should make in order to kind of pull our states back up onto the path to protect children. And I'm just blessed to be able to use my experiences, both lived and professional, to try to make change, and honored to partner with lots of incredible people that are doing the very same thing.
I love the passion that you have. That's really obvious. You're obviously a hero maker.
Heromaker. I'm so honored to have that. When I saw your guys' podcast title, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
That's you.
You are like the embodiment of somebody who actually really encourages people that they can also be heroes. Like they could actually make a difference, a really positive difference in their lives and in the lives of those around them. And then obviously with the laws changing, 127 recommendations is significant.
Yeah.
So keep going. You got it. You got it. Go. And also helping police recognize and be trained better on how to as well protect the children and the women and potential victims and even the victims. What is one thing that you want us to know, when it comes to understanding the system of human trafficking?
So good. I mean, it's do we have another hour? I think, yeah, it's so hard. I mean, this could be an entire college class, right? It's the systemic issues of prostitution have been around. It's the oldest oppression. It's not the oldest profession because it's not work like any other work. It's gender-based violence. It's violence against women. It's violence against those who attack and target the most marginalized in society. It's such a social behavioral cocktail of how pornified our culture has gotten, and how people have been addicted to porn by the age of 30 and are starting to buy porn with skin on, is literally what I heard one person call it. And so it's so many layers and so many ways to get involved in the fight. And that's why I encourage people to find their lane, because whether you're going to fight policy and look at laws that exist, a report came out, I think last year, that was 12 states that still don't really allow victims to vacate their record upon escape. And so Arizona is a prime example. Arizona's vacator law says you have to be crime-free for 99 years before you can get prostitution off your record. Where's our Arizona advocates that are, and there's a lot. I'm not saying where are they, like calling them out. There are so many great people in Arizona doing incredible work. That's one place that I would love for people, if you're in, states are kind of dependent on where you live in terms of voting. And so I think it's important that we all just need to figure out, you might not feel like you're going to go hit the streets today and start a street outreach with your church. And maybe you do, maybe you feel, but we all can do something. Minimally, we can learn how to make our communities safe. We can, legalize prostitution is on the ballot this year. There's almost 7 states that are trying to legalize prostitution, or what's called full decrim. Are you in one of those states? Do you know what your representatives are pushing for? Do you know? Yeah, so there's just so many ways we can be involved and be informed. And I think learning how to keep our kids safe, learning those signs of when you see money in one of your kids' top drawers, learning what to do when you see your son watching, videos online that they shouldn't, or they're getting videos from their friends who didn't have a parental filter on, even those yours might. It's all of that. It's learning predatory behavior based on age. If you have elementary kids versus middle versus high schools, are very different predatory tactics. And so I think we can get educated to be safe for ourselves and our community. And then we also could look into things like, am I called to do something? Simply giving every month to a local nonprofit is hugely important and valuable. I say it's like shopping mom and pop at Christmas instead of shopping big box retailers. Are you giving just even a little to your local safe home or your local trafficking group? Who is that? Do you know? Do you follow them online minimally so you know what trafficking looks like in your community? Because how it looks in Montreal, very different than how it looks in Chicago. Very different. And do you know those differences? Join your local task force, sign up for their newsletters. Just get educated is a great start.
So Rebecca, I don't have this great gift of prophecy, but every once in a while I like to think that I kind of I'm just gonna go there anyways. I think what you're saying, right? You're talking about education. You're talking about getting involved, and I hear you talking about just advocacy, right? In different forms. And and this I'm going to make a prediction, Ann. I'm going to say 2021, you guys, that is going to be the year of advocacy for people. There's so many big issues right now that we're sitting on, that it is time for all of us to use our brains, use our hearts, use our voices, and really let our lives be impactful, right?
So true.
I'm so moved when I hear of people just stepping out and using their voices and calling out the wrongs, even if it costs you something. And in this area, just quick story, Rebecca, there is, so the ministry that I serve with, we go into some of the spas, or in our area. And a couple years ago, when one had opened up here, there was a big upheaval in our community, that people are we don't want that open, our kids are here and la la and all this. And I remember some of the people were in the ministry were saying, well, you know what, there are women inside of there. There's women, we need to care for those women too. And it created division. I mean, it was a very divisive thing. And I think right now that all of us need to somehow be checking even the way that we see other people and issues, and really asking, are we looking through a healthy lens? Do you have any final words on that? Just kind of our own hearts and our own minds?
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying. We need to be really thoughtful around, before you speak, think. I know that sounds so simple, right? But think through both sides of equations, 3 sides, 4 sides of this compass approach kind of. I think what I'm seeing also happen for those that are stepping into advocacy, we have to be equipped with truth. There's so much misinformation on the internet. We have to know how to sort through sensational rhetoric to find the truth, because that's really going to equip you to see both sides of the equation and then figure out a prayerful response on what you're going to do. And it is, you can see both sides. I can see the community health risk of not having a massage parlor next door to my home. I don't want my little girls playing sidewalk chalk with having people in and out all hours of the night. And yet there are people inside. And so how do we do both well? How can we find places to unite, not divide? How can we say, great, you pass the law for no massage parlors in this district, and you go in and help work with law enforcement to get the victims, right? Like there's can be both. It doesn't have to be an either or. That's why us finding our lane is so important, because we're all needed at the table to do. That's what makes great teams. If you had a pitcher and no catcher, you wouldn't have a baseball team. Yeah. You need, everybody needs to come to the table. But I think it starts with sorting through truth. I've never seen so much misinformation about a topic online. It's kind of shocking as an expert to see really smart people believing some of the myths. And so we try to teach people on our site and through our different varying media platforms to know how to sort through misinformation. But everyone's needed. We're all needed. Find both sides of the coin and see how they both need to be at the table. We talk about you see this with any other industry, right? You see it with hospitals. You wouldn't be able to have the doctors not have admin for insurance billing. You wouldn't be able to not have an ambulance EMT person pull up. Everybody is needed at the table, everybody.
Ann, any final thoughts from you?
I like it. I'm challenged. Thank you. I mean, education for sure, but also the right information. So I would definitely recommend checking out your book and checking out your website. So I think Laurie's going to ask in a second about your socials and how we can find you. But also, I feel like, yes, you're right. I think we all have a role to play. Even if it's preventative, you know what I mean? Like really taking a young woman or a young man under our wings, just like loving them into healthy adults. Like young boys don't feel the need to get satisfied through pornography or something like that, or for women to feel like they need love and that they'll find it however possible. That they feel so loved, and that probably is not their parents but another loving adult who's actually super healthy themselves. Like check your self-awareness and your motivations, but like to mentor young women so that they become very, very healthy and confident and know that they're loved.
Yeah. So good.
And Rebecca, I would say too, like I love it because I feel like you are a walking example of somebody who has experienced great trauma, and now you are smiling and you're doing what God's called you to do, and it's just fantastic. And so like you yourself are just a great source of inspiration to others. And so I hope anybody who's listening to this podcast who are just maybe in the middle of some great struggle right now, just to have that hope that it won't end there. Like there will be another day that dawns, and to keep fighting and to keep having that hope. So Rebecca, where can we find you online?
Yeah, you can go to RebeccaBender.org. All of our socials down at the bottom. I'm on Instagram the most, but that would be the best place to start, RebeccaBender.org.
Great. Okay. And we will link to that in the show notes, and we'll link to your book. And Rebecca, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you guys. It was so fun. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening to another episode. And we will, if you guys like us, give us a 5-star rating, comment, leave reviews. And we're going to drop a couple more episodes this week, and we'll see you guys next time.